I need a cupboard for this corner of the living room, but it's a bit of an awkward shape. It's wide, not very deep, so I'm going to have to build my own. So I've come up with this design to make good use of all the space. It's somewhat Art Deco inspired, and it's got various aspects which are going to light up this corner of the room. The build starts with a delivery of sheet materials from Atlantic Timber. The big 8x4 sheets are good quality and made of black throughout MDF called Valchromat, which is perfect for this build. So if you're in the northwest of England, check out the link in the description. This video isn't sponsored by them, but they did give me a small discount on the order. My workshop isn't very big, so the first job is breaking down the large sheets into small enough pieces to move around and get out of the way. The tape measure works fine for marking out, but I've gone for a bit of an upgrade here. It's a cheap version, £34 at the time, of a popular brand's T-ruler. It's square and works well, however I found the markings on the inside are a little off. Here I'm using the track saw to cut the longest pieces, the top, middle and bottom bits, as they won't fit on the table saw. The carcass is going to be rather large, so it's being made in two sections to make it more manageable, with the bottom bit being made first. Now I can rip the rest of the carcass down with the table saw, where it's far easier to get parallel cuts. Before I built anything, the first thing I did was 3D model the design. I used that to work out the materials I'd need, and now I can use it as a cut list. Time for another small upgrade. My old pencil's down to a stub, so I got a cheap set of mechanical pencils for £14. It's got various thicknesses, spare leads and accessories, and it's an absolute bargain. The carcass will be fastened together with dominoes for alignment, glue for strength, and screws for clamping. Layout lines are marked out for the dominoes, which will go in each joint. These have got the advantage that you can test fit them as you go along to make sure everything fits. One of the compartments will be for a drinks cabinet, so I'm building the base of it out of hardwood so it feels a bit nicer. I'll be using a Roco for the hardwood on this project. The batch I've got ends up varying quite a lot in figure and colour, as you'll see later on. I'd have preferred something a bit more consistent, but it gives the piece a bit more character. Now I'm ripping down and thicknessing some thin strips which will get stuck to the front of the plywood carcass. This will make up what's usually the face frame in a more traditional cabinet. The front of the cupboard is going to be wooden slats on a black backing, so I'm painting the interior edges black so when the doors are shut there's no plywood showing through. The edge strips are glued in place using masking tape to clamp it onto the plywood. Next day the strips are trimmed flush with a router. While it's easy to access, I mark out and drill the holes for the shelving pegs. Also the holes for screwing the carcass together are drilled and countersunk to make assembly as easy as possible. The cupboard's going to stand on a base to give it the maximum height above the skirting boards it can. So measure it out, and then back in the workshop, rip down some lengths of plywood and assemble a base. I knew from when the floor went down that one corner was a lot higher than anywhere else, but seeing how much was a surprise. With a level on top, the base is shimmed out, and a large washer helps scribe a line onto all the pieces. I'm now taking the base back apart again and using a bandsaw to cut along the scribe lines. Reassembled and back in position, the base is now level, however the house is not. The skirting on each side are really different heights, one's higher, one's lower. To raise it up I could use them screwing the feet, however I've got a sheet of rubber, but cut up and spaced regularly will raise the base by just the right amount. Now I'm putting a hole in the bottom for the mains power cable to enter, and then it's finally onto assembly. Assembly actually goes pretty well. The dominoes aligned everything, and I came with screws to tighten up the vertical boards and used band clamps to close up any gaps. And I didn't want any screws to be visible on the inside of a piece. By a complete stroke of luck, the band clamps are just long enough to go around the unit horizontally, clamp the other axis tight until the glue sets. A back panel made from 12mm plies and screwed on, which really stiffens up the whole thing, and it finally can be moved into place. There's a gap in between a cupboard on the wall. It starts off small at the bottom and gets bigger as it goes up, but thankfully it's just the one cover wall. The cupboard needs attaching to the wall as it's going to be really front heavy. I'm finding the studs here, then using 3 small holes to ensure I've got the centre of the studs. Nothing certain in this house. A laser level is then used to transfer the stud position into the carcass, where it's pre-drilled and screwed in. The top section is going to be made in the same way as the bottom, so I'll skip that bit. But the back panel will need some extra work, as the bottom section is going to be the back of a display area and it's going to be painted black. The positions of all the pieces are marked onto the backboard, and the bottom is primed black, sanded, and a second coat applied. To make things as easy as possible in assembly, I'm marking and drilling the back panel so it can be screwed onto a carcass. The rest of the back panel, front and back, is then painted with Danish oil to try and help prevent warping. I wanted the display area to have a really dark back and sides, so the objects inside are really vivid against the backdrop. The artist Stuart Semple does a range of matte ultra black paints, and I thought I'd give it a go. This 2.0 version apparently absorbs 96% of visible light, and there's a 3 and 4.02 which absorb more, but I read they're more difficult to apply. Here, a soft brush is used as directed, and the first coat looks great initially, however after it dries it leaves some chalky marks. Now I can assemble the top piece in my living room and get it ready to drop onto the bottom. The pre-drilled holes in the back make it easier to drill through into the carcass and then screw it all together. Right, let's get this thing over there. Let's go fractionally back. Yep, and then
Towards me.
yeah, and then pop it up. I think that's it.
There's just a small gap here.
Well, it's in, and to say I'm relieved is an understatement. That was a bit of a struggle at the end there. The clearances were so tight, but it's in. Now it's in position, I put on the second coat of a 2.0, and to be fair, it looks a lot better after this. I've been wondering how to add a special touch to this build, and that's where the sponsor for this video comes in, JLC 3DP. They offer a wide range of 3D printing services, including one which I was really interested by. They offer an advanced SLM service, which produces stainless steel prints, and I thought this would be perfect for some custom handles. I created 3 different designs, and it was easy to upload them to the JLC 3DP site. The process is simple, and you get a quote straight away. I especially like the tools for checking your design will print properly, and how each step of the production process can be tracked. They have production times as fast as 24 hours, and can deliver within 2 days. The prints have come out really nicely. The handles are solid, with a nice weight to them. The details, including a recess for a lighting strip and a pipe for the wiring, are well defined, and I think they really add to the end product. JLC 3DP. 3D printing starts at 3 cents, up to $60 new user coupons are linked below. So now I need to tap the holes because they're going to be bolted into the cupboards, and after that give them a good coat of etch primer, and finally a few coats of Rust-Oleum black matte. So now they're all painted up and looking good. The last step is to insert the LED strip, which will give them a nice glow from behind. I'm now going to put the handles to one side until they're ready to be fitted at the end of the project. Now I'm back to cutting down some timber, ready for gluing up into a wider board, which will form the bottom of the display area. It then goes through the thicknesser to get it all nice and flat, and then it can be sanded and the edges broken. I found these plastic rails which have got 2 slots for a couple of pieces of glass or acrylic to slide within. I'm going to cut a groove for the lower one to fit into, and the upper one will be surface mounted. A dado stack's probably the best tool to use for this job, but I don't have one, so I just move the fence across a little bit each time and make multiple passes until I've cut out the whole groove. Here I'm applying some finish and I can install it into the cupboard. To install it, I first drill down using a guide to ensure the holes are straight, and then drill up into the shelf. The holes in the bottom are then drilled out larger to allow for some wood movement, and it's all screwed together. I'm now drilling out some regular holes in the top rail, and it's temporarily screwed into place. I found this black aluminium profile which matches the height of the top rail. Some 5mm LED strip fits in it perfectly. Then add some adhesive tape to both sides which will secure it in place. Now it's time to add the shelving pegs and the shelves themselves go in. The big pile of sheet materials in the workshop is slowly going down. Next, I cut up all the parts to make the drawers. I used a router table to add rebates or rabbets across the pond. The bit height is set to half the material thickness, and the fence is set so the cut is as deep as the full material thickness. This way the same setup works for both the sides and the bottom piece. The inside faces are finished with Danish oil before the glue is added to the rebates and the box put together and held with bang clamps. A few brad nails then secures everything together. The drawer runners are now installed using some 123 blocks to ensure consistency. The drawers themselves are then marked up, drilled, and have the other part of the runner installed before slotting into place. Now I'm cutting down a couple of pieces of Rocco to form a shelf for a drinks cabinet which will have a mitered edge. The top piece then goes into the CNC machine where it has a honeycomb pattern built into it. The cut is pretty deep and goes most of the way through, leaving only a few millimetre on the underside. While I'm waiting for that to finish cutting, I'm adding some shallow 45-degree domino cuts to the side piece. The top will get the same treatment later and it will hopefully make it easy to glue up. After a couple of hours, the CNC machine is finally finished and now it's epoxy time. The resin is mixed up and some mica powder added to make it slightly opaque. It's then degassed and poured into the honeycomb. It's been a couple of days and now it's completely solid, so now it's back onto the CNC to surface the top flat. It's then flipped over and the remaining couple of millimetre milled away until the epoxy can be seen. I'm going to put an LED underneath this and the bottles can go on top and then be illuminated from below. To glue it up, I took the bits I'd chopped off when I actually formed the mitre and glued them back on using masking tape and super glue. That way they formed a surface for the clamps to go on. The edge is now rounded over and a bit of glue and sanding fills in any gaps. A strip of plywood is cut to form a rear support and is dominoed in place. Now it can be finished and is ready to go in the cabinet. I got a custom sized bit of acrylic mirror cut to size from a supplier on eBay and I'm slotting it into place at the back of a drinks cabinet. I've already installed an LED channel, so now the positions where the holes need to go to mount it in place can be drilled. If you like this video, please consider subscribing to support the channel. Now it's on to making the fronts. These will be the most visually interesting aspects of the design, but I'm not particularly looking forward to making the many slats required. Anywho, here we go. All the boards are rough sawn, so first they need chopping up and milling square. The pieces were then ripped down, leaving a lot of extra material on the side. Now the bandsaw is used to cut thin strips from each piece. The slats I'm cutting at the moment would be for the top of a cupboard, so I'm marking them all so I can grain match them later. That's without doubt the most stress I've ever seen inside a single plank of wood. The curve on that's like a banana. The process of milling, chopping and then cutting down into thinner slabs was repeated for all the necessary pieces. This took its toll on the bandsaw and the blade was absolutely cooked. A new blade from Tough Saws got me cutting again, and the difference in quality and speed was night and day. Cutting thin strips of wood can release the internal tension and cause them to bow. I've made the pieces oversized to account for this and can run them over the jointer to get a straight edge again. The slats then go through the thicknesser to get rid of the bandsaw marks. I'm now using the table saw to cut all the slats down to the final dimension of 40mm. This gave me quite a pile of offcuts. If anyone can think of anything to do with these in a future project, please let me know in the comments. So that's all the straight slats finally done. Now it's time to cut the pieces of Velcro mat into the 9 different shapes that I'll need for the different cupboard and drawer fronts. These will be the topmost doors. The slats are card scraped to ensure a good finish, and sanded and finished with Rubio. The slats are glued down using Type Bond wood glue for strength and super glue with activator for instant clamping. This way the previous slat can be used as a guide for the next one pretty much straight away. Now I'm swapping out the rip blade on the table saw for a crosscut blade to try and minimise tear out on the slats while cutting down the panels. The edges of the panels are quite irregular with the slats sticking out at different amounts, so an offcut strip of the base material slid underneath the slats and allows for a straight cut. There was some tear out doing it this way, but careful fixes and sanding minimise the effect of it. If anyone's got any better suggestions how to do this, please let me know in the comments. Next, I need to attach the doors to the cupboard. I've made a simple jig to do this, which you can then use to transfer the whole positions of the hinges onto the carcass. To work out where the holes on the door needs to go, I've got an offcut of a correct width, but with enough space underneath to get a pencil behind, mark the positions. These are drilled out and the test piece mounted to ensure it's right. After this, I can transfer the holes onto the actual door and it's screwed into place. The hinges are spring loaded to make the door easy to open and prevent it slamming shut. Next, the slats for the largest doors are prepared and glued into place in the same way as the other ones. The middle door, which covers the drinks cabinet, is the most detailed. Each slat will have a 90-degree turn, which is created by cutting a 45-degree mitre between 2 slats, then taking one of the mitre offcuts and positioning it on the underside of the join. The 3 pieces are then glued together with wood glue and CA glue. Now, using a CNC machine, I cut out a template with a 40mm radius corner. I'll use that as a router template to cut out the other pieces. I'm using a bandsaw to cut off a majority of the material, and then I stick the template onto it with some double-sided tape. A compression spiral bit then is used to transfer the shape onto the slat. Most of the slats are 6mm thick, but the ones that make up the drawers, centre and bottom cupboard doors are 10mm. This is to allow enough material to route out a rebate on the underside of 2 slats on each panel. These will have 3mm LED strips attached to the sides. I do a couple of passes, eating away a bit more each time so it's not too aggressive on the thin wood. Without proper dust extraction, this makes quite a mess of my workshop. The 3mm strip has cut and solder points on the underside. Here I'm marking the position onto the slat so I can drill out some holes in the channel for wires. I end up putting another hole in the centre to give enough space for the wires to bend up 90 degrees in the middle. I can then glue the panels together as normal, but the slats which have the lights are clamped instead. Holes can then be drilled and countersunk for screws, so the LED slats can be removed for future maintenance. I'm also putting in the hole which will allow the wires to come through from the LEDs. I temporarily attach a strip along the top and mark the position of the middle and the spacer strip. Using that, I can clamp against it and use it to put the rest of the slats in. To finish off the top of the panels, I cut some corner strips which will cover the MDF along the top edge and make it look nicer. Right, last one. Now it's time to mount the doors. I'm using Blum Blue Motion soft close hinges. They require larger depth than the MDF is thick, so I'll paint up some 3mm ply and glue it on at the hinge positions. This then gives enough depth to drill out the cups where the falls in a bit. I'm using inlay hinges which attach to the outer sides of the cupboard, and then half overlay hinges on the middle doors so the gaps between the doors always have something behind them. The shelves are looking a little bit neglected at the moment, so I'm using some black iron-on edge banding to finish them off. I'm wiring up the drawer fronts now. The LED strip is cut to size, then the adhesive scrapes off the solder points and the wires attached. The strip is then stuck on, aligning the wires with the holes. The drawers will be in the way of the wires on the reverse of the drawer fronts, so channels created to route them out the side. The next job is to do exactly the same process on the curved slats. Apart from this time, remember to use a bit of hot glue to act as strain relief. The centre handles can be positioned in the middle of the door instead of at the side like you'd expect for a side opening door, but this is purely an aesthetic choice. I use a little jig to transfer the hole positions for the bolts and its wires, and then make a little bit of capping to hide the cabling away. The last couple of doors then go on. The bottom one starts off well over to one side, but these Blum hinges are brilliant and have enough adjustment built in to allow it to be shifted across. The top door doesn't stay shut naturally. That's because there's a spring-loaded switch attached to the frame to turn off the lights inside when the door is shut, and that's pushing the door open, so I'm attaching a magnetic latch to keep it closed. The display area is getting closed in by a couple of pieces of 4mm thick acrylic by a custom cut from an eBay seller. The sheets go into the bottom track first, then the top track goes on and is pushed up into place against the frame. The sheets are then moved from one side to the other to allow access to the screw holes to screw it in. The wiring prep's made easy using Wago connectors, and these 3D printed mounts are found on Thingiverse. The link's in the description, and they make wiring up so much neater. I designed and printed up some double and single cable clips with screw holes. I ended up using them a lot, especially at the back of this drawer where no one will ever see. Now I'm pre-drilling holes in the drawer box, ready for the fronts to go on. Some double-sided tape just allows enough stick to position the fronts on and transfer the drill holes to them. I wanted a way of delivering power to the drawers without using long cables, and settled on these magnetic pogo connectors. I made up some 3D printed mounts and used a small piece of prototype board to solder them to the small pins on the connectors. This gave a larger surface area to solder the wires to. A friend later suggested I could have used some copper tape in conjunction with the pogo connectors to continuously deliver power to the drawer as it came out and kept the lights on, but it was a bit too late by then, and to be honest, this works pretty well. I 3D printed a jig for each type of handle with the same hole patterns and a mark in the centre. This made marking out the holes for handles simple. Now I'm installing the actual handles themselves. The wires just push through their own hole and then they bolt in place. My final job is to run all the wiring back to this Shelly LED controller. It's got 4 channels which can be dimmed separately and connected to Home Assistant, so it can all be turned on from this switch. I'm really happy with how the cupboard came out. We finally got some storage in the room and a place to show off my mineral collection. The colours in the wood can be seen clearly in the daytime, but for me, it looks best at night.